Hi, I'm Samar, and today I'm going to speak to you about the silent threat, or what I've called the silent threat. About how we can use today's challenges to help shape tomorrow's cybersecurity. But before I dig into my presentation, I thought I'll take a moment to tell you a little bit about myself. I didn't put too much text on there, you know. I've moved around quite a bit, and I've lived in different cities, so there's a lot of background. But it all kind of started in 2001. In 2001, I moved to London to study, and I studied criminology and criminal justice. And not longer after I graduated, I started working for the Serious Organised Crime Agency in the UK, and today it's known as the National Crime Agency. For those of you who don't know, the National Crime Agency, it's a law enforcement-led agency that deals with quite high-level crime. When working at SOCA, or the NCA as it was known then, I took up two posts. One of them was quite strategic, and in that post, I was involved in a high-level, quite a large-scale IT-enabled business change project. And it was kind of here that I gained my interest for IT. And so not long after that, I started working in the cybercrime department at SOCA, or NCA it is known today. I was an intelligence analyst, or cybercrime investigator, if you'd like to call it. I worked there a couple of years, and then after that, I moved back home to Sweden. That's where I'm from. I kind of used my previous experience and knowledge and so on to further my studies. I started studying again. And this time I chose to study information security. I've also studied decision theory and risk analysis as well. At present, obviously I have a huge interest for IT, but at the moment I also have an interest for law enforcement, so I'm currently working as an investigator at the Swedish Police Authority. However, I would like to point out that my being here today has actually nothing to do with my work at the police, and is more to do with my time at university, and more particularly the time that I spent studying information security. As part of my time at university, I did a study into information security in developing countries. The study did quite well. And actually, later on this year, it's going to be published as a chapter and part of a book, courtesy of the Institute for Engineering and Technology. So why did I choose information security in developing countries? And you know, most of you here are IT security specialists. Most of you probably a few information security people. But the reason why I focused it just on developing countries was that this is an area that is actually quite often overlooked. And there's very little research in the field. And developing countries are receiving new technology from countries in the developed world. They don't have the experience to use this stuff, and so the security risks are also increasing in tandem with that. To do this research, obviously, given that there was little research in the fields as it was, what I did was, with the time that I had available, was kind of find as much scientific research on information security as possible. I think in total it was kind of like 90 articles that I then scanned for any information to do with information security in developing countries. I then grouped that information together, analyzed it step by step, and from that, a few key themes arose. Now, there was one more theme, dependencies, but that wasn't that big. But these were the four key themes that came. Culture, education, policy, and legislation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to you a little bit about, the key findings that came into this. So to begin with, culture. And now I know culture here, most countries have their own culture and so on. But in this study, I was actually focusing on culture in terms of information security. So what do the people have for understanding? What is it they understand about information security? And what was found was that the majority, or a common theme that arose from all of the research that I went through, was that it was a resistance to change in terms of culture. People were quite happy to do things the way they always have, and they don't want to change the way that they do things. And there was also a risk. Well, people felt that with all this new technology that was coming, it was posing a risk to their job, a threat. It's a threat to their job that they're going to eventually be replaced by this new technology. And so they kind of don't want to change the way that they work with the fear that their job will eventually disappear. Also, there was a view that the threat is external and not internal. Technology is quite new to developing countries, and they see the threat in terms of information security and cybersecurity as something that happens in other countries and not in theirs, and so, you know, who cares? Another theme, or the one that I mentioned previously, was education. And here I'm talking about education mainly in terms of information security and what do people know about information security. And what was found here also, well, there was a lack of awareness in terms of information security. And information security also involving kind of cybersecurity as well. And there was a lack of awareness amongst the general public, the people. They don't really know what information security is. They don't know why it's important. But more specifically, there's a lack of awareness amongst employees of organizations, of companies. And that's quite worrying, actually. But apart from the fact that there's lack of awareness amongst the general public and there's lack of awareness amongst the employees, there is little, and in some places, nothing being done about this. And when I mean by education, we're talking information security, and we're focusing on both technical and non-technical issues. So kind of awareness about the hardware, the computers, education on how to use them, and also the software, and the non-technical issues, the risks that are involved, and what do we need to think about when kind of using this new technology. The third theme, policy. In terms of policy, again, similar to the previous theme, there was a lack of policy within companies and organizations, government agencies even, law enforcement too. Lack of policies, and in some places, no policies whatsoever. And even if there was policies in some organizations of companies, they weren't actually even being implemented. They're just there so that they kind of tick a box that they have a policy, but then they're not actually being implemented. And apart from that, there was also the idea that, so we have all these policies, but then nobody knows who's responsible for what. Just as long as somebody actually writes this policy, then it's kind of done. And the fourth theme that arose, it was in terms of legislation. In terms of legislation, again, lack of legal frameworks. In some countries, there is legislation in terms of information security, in terms of cybercrime, and in some countries, there are none whatsoever. Again, even if there was legislation in some countries, there's very limited awareness about this legislation and how it is to be used. And some countries, obviously, they have very limited or, in fact, no laws whatsoever. And this is very important, actually, and you might be wondering why. Well, for example, now I don't know the details of this because it was a long time ago, but it's just an example where there was actually one person, for example, based in, I think it was Bangladesh, and he kind of, I can't remember the details of the story, but the point of the story is that he was based in Bangladesh, and the attack that he did, or he was responsible for, affected other countries, UK in particular. And when UK tried to work together with Bangladesh, I believe it was, there wasn't really much Bangladesh could do because there wasn't really much legislation, and even the law enforcement there couldn't actually carry out their work. So, for example, when they go to the house and they want to seize computers, they don't actually know which part of the computer they're supposed to seize. And so this poses a problem, especially for law enforcement, when they try to prosecute the person because they don't really know what they're doing. Eventually, you will understand why this is important. But anyway, here is a very nice map that I found. And I don't expect you to be good in geography because you can't really clearly see the countries labeled here. And the figures at the bottom aren't really that important either. This is a cybercrime heat map. It's available online on the Europol website. As you can see on the map, there are 3 shades. There is the darker blue, the lighter shade of blue, and also the white blue. The darker blue, this basically shows the countries of origin for cyber attacks, or where cyber attacks are actually originating from. And the countries in the darker blue are kind of like the hotspots, Russia and China and so on. But that's not what we're looking at here and not what is actually important. What's important is the countries in the light blue. And as you can see, the countries in the light blue are not actually in the developed countries, it's actually more developing countries, in particular Nigeria, which is quite a nice dark blue, and you also have South America, in particular Brazil, which is up and coming country in terms of cyber attacks. Why is this important? Now, if I go back to it, it was my study was on information security in developing countries, and there were 4 key themes that came up. The culture, the education, the policy, and the legislation. Another study was actually based on information security in developing countries. But as you can see from the map, you know, there is a lack of information, lack of knowledge in terms of information security in developing countries. However, as could be seen in the map, the lighter shades of blue, developing countries are actually also gaining strength in terms of cybercrime. So what happens in developing countries is actually affecting developed countries. Some cybercrimes, I'll give you a couple of examples, and FC had gone through those as well. If we go through some of the key security breaches and attacks that happened this year, WannaCry, Petya, and then there's another one, business email compromise. There's actually many security breaches that occurred during the year. And obviously I can't list them all out because it will take too long and we would be here forever. But the point that I would like to make is that these crimes, in particular business email compromise, that's the first 2 are ransomware, but the other one is actually more of a scam. And the person who was responsible for this was actually based in Nigeria. And I don't know, does anybody know what they are? Maybe, no? Nobody heard of them? No? Okay. Business email compromise is a scam where the person, well, actually the guy that was caught for doing or being responsible for this was based in Nigeria, and he had about 30 networks working for him. And it was a scam where they kind of send an email to the CEO of a company, and they hack his system, and then from the CEO's computer, they kind of send emails out to other CEOs, and these people think that they're talking to the real CEO of the company, and sometimes it will involve sending invoices and payments and wire transfers and so on. So it's actually a scam. But what's interesting, considering kind of like Nigeria being a developing country, this is an attack originating from Nigeria, but actually affecting countries worldwide. And same with the other 2, although the other 2 are, I'm kind of more focused at the third one. The point being that cybercrime is actually international and is global, and no matter where it comes from, it affects people globally, all over the world. This, maybe you're kind of more familiar with. Everybody know a little bit about this? Yes? Okay. So this is a very nice example of why information security is important. Now, although my research was actually focused on information security in developing countries, I reiterate that the findings can be applied globally, so to say. And this is an example from Sweden. It's the transport agency. It's an IT scandal that occurred well, it actually occurred 2 years ago, but it only recently came to light. And so what happened was, now the transport agency had a database, and now I don't know the exact details of the whole story because I'm not involved in this at all. But they had this database, and you know, I do believe that IT people do a good job, so I'm sure it was pretty secure. However, it was the director general of the transport agency who kind of made a really bad decision. And basically, she kind of was told that, or she found out that this database needed to be updated or so on. And they informed her staff informed her that the people who are going to be doing this is IBM. However, IBM is going to outsource the work, and it's actually going to go to places like Serbia and other countries in Eastern Europe. Just like, okay, fine. And then she finds out after a while that, you know, these people, they don't actually have security clearance, and they can't actually be accessing this data. And she's like, okay, then, well, how long is it going to take for them to get security clearance? And they said, well, it's going to take a long time. Oh, well, never mind, just send the database to them. And this kind of goes back to the findings of my research in terms of information security in developing countries. And if we go back to the 4 key themes, culture, education, and here we're talking policy and a little bit of legislation. Obviously, no clear area of responsibility. Nobody wants to kind of do what they're supposed to do. And so, you know, they kind of kept this under wraps, and it was only earlier this year that this actually came to the knowledge of the people and so on. I like this one in particular. Anna Johansson, jag har inget att skämmas för. For those of you who don't speak Swedish, it's one of the ministers. It's a headline in the newspaper, and she says, I have nothing to be ashamed about. And so, okay, she has nothing to be ashamed about. And, you know, you have this policy, you have this database, it's nice and it's secure. People inform you that, you know, the people who are going to get access to this really shouldn't have access to this. Maybe I didn't mention, but the database actually included information on private people, on their vehicles, but not only private people, but it also contained information about law enforcement vehicles and military vehicles. And some of the information was actually classified because some of these vehicles were being used in undercover work and so on. And she has nothing to be ashamed about in actually giving this information out to people who shouldn't be accessing it. So in this example, we can see how the things that came to light in the research are actually even valid kind of here in Sweden. Most people here, I assume, are IT specialists. My work is focused on information security. Information security is made up of people, processes, and technology. Technology is obviously the biggest one. And what people usually tend to do is they focus on the technology. It's always the technology. It's always the IT security, cybersecurity, everything is responsible for the technology. However, it all falls under information security. Technology and cybersecurity is just a component of information security. So information security is made up of these 3 components, and IT security, even though it's quite large, and sometimes kind of people think it stands on its own, which it kind of does, but efficient IT security cannot be implemented without the people and the processes. And when I talk about the people, I mean the people who have access to the system, and when I say process, I mean the policy, the legislations, for example. If we go back to the IT scandal, where the policy is there and the law says that, you know, you shouldn't be given out this information, you choose to ignore the law and you still do it. A person makes a mistake, the technology is at risk, all because people didn't follow the process. So sometimes the process is there, the people don't listen, the technology screws up. Sometimes it's the technology that screws up again because the people didn't update it when they should have. If we go back to the example, I think Equifax? Equifax, exactly. Equifax. In Equifax, the security breach recently. The reason behind the security breach was obviously that the patch wasn't updated. Fair enough. Whose responsibility was it to update the patch? It was the people. So if we go to this picture, chess. You're probably wondering what chess has to do with information security. I actually don't play chess. I mean, I have played it a few times, but not too much. However, chess. Chess is a game of strategy. In playing a game of chess, you need to be proactive. You kind of need to have a plan. When you sit down with the opponent, you need to kind of think, what move do I want to make? And with every move that you make, you kind of have to analyze and reanalyze the situation. If I make this move, what vulnerabilities am I opening up to? How can I cover it so that, you know, I don't lose the game? So it's all about strategy. And information security is also similar to a game of chess. It's about being strategic. It's about thinking, it's about being proactive, it's about planning ahead, and then analyzing and also reanalyzing. For every time that you find that there's a vulnerability, you kind of need to take the step to protect yourself or the company or the organization. Now I'll go back to the example in Equifax, when we're talking about the patch in the system that wasn't updated. And if we think a little bit about a game of chess, again, you might not get it here, but it's coming. A game of chess, or chess in general, the game, is very similar to information security. And both in a game of chess and also in information security, the weakest link is the same. The weakest link is human error. In a game of chess, it is the person that will make the mistake and eventually lose the game. And it's the same kind of thing with information security. It is the people who have access or responsibility for the system that are making the mistakes. In IT security in itself is actually more about ensuring the safety of having the best technology and the best IT, and making sure that all the digital information is actually secure. And information security made up of IT security, we have to always remember that IT security does not stand on its own, and it actually involves the people and the processes. So in conclusion, if we go back to the beginning, and now the actual research that I kind of presented to you had to do with information security in developing countries. And there were 4 key themes that came to light, and these are actually quite important. The culture of the people, the culture of the company. The education, how much do people know within the company, how much do people know in general about information security. The policy, what policies are in place, who's responsible for producing these policies, and when people don't actually follow these policies, who's actually responsible and who is held accountable for not following these policies. And then there's the legislation, not just in our country, but in countries all over the world. What is their legislation? Because there will come a time when an attack will come from another country, and they don't actually know what legislation they have, and the targets will be worldwide, you know, and you won't really be able to do much about it if there isn't adequate legislation in all the countries. And the internet is global. There are no physical boundaries. And so too should be information security. The responsibility of ensuring adequate information security is something that we should take all together. All countries should work together in order to ensure adequate information security and adequate internet IT security. In order to ensure these things, not just developing countries, but just countries in general, companies, organizations, and so on, you need to have a lucid policy, transparent legislation, but in order to do this, you need to work with the people, to educate them and to improve the culture so that they understand the importance of information security. But most importantly, information security is a little bit like a game of chess. Be proactive, think about your next move, plan your next move, analyze and then reanalyze the situation. Thank you.